I was 70 miles from the nearest city when I first told myself the house was empty. I remember thinking it as I stood on the porch, key in hand, staring at the front door like it might blink back at me. The real estate listing had used words like quiet, spacious, full of character, the kind of language people use when they don't want to explain what's wrong. The house sat alone at the end of a gravel road that hadn't seen fresh tire tracks in weeks. Pines crowded close on all sides, their branches knitting together above the roof like clasped fingers. No neighbors, no streetlights, just wind, trees, and the steady hum of insects that seemed to fade the longer I stood there. I told myself that was the appeal. I'd needed isolation, somewhere to think, somewhere to disappear for a while. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. The sound echoed deeper than I expected, traveling down hallways I couldn't yet see. The house was quiet. Not peaceful, just quiet. I stood there longer than necessary, listening. No footsteps above me. No voices, no television murmuring from another room. Just my own breathing, a little too loud in the stillness. Empty, I reminded myself. The living room opened up to the left, wide and sunlit despite the trees outside. Tall windows filtered the afternoon light into pale strips across the floor. Dust motes drifted lazily through the air, undisturbed. The furniture was sparse: an old sofa, a coffee table with a water ring permanently etched into its surface, a bookcase that still held a few forgotten paperbacks. Someone had lived here once. That thought lingered longer than it should have. I walked through the room slowly, my footsteps soft against the hardwood. Every sound seemed amplified, bouncing back at me from unseen corners. I half expected the house to answer, to acknowledge me somehow. It didn't. The kitchen sat at the back of the house. Clean, surprisingly so. The cabinets were empty, the sink dry. A calendar still hung on the wall, yellowed with age. I didn't look at the date. I wasn't sure I wanted to know how long it had been there. Beyond the kitchen was a narrow hallway that led to the bedrooms. 3 doors, all closed. The corridor felt darker than the rest of the house, the light thinning as though it struggled to reach the end. I hesitated there. I don't know why. It wasn't fear, not exactly. More like reluctance, as if opening those doors would make the house feel less theoretical, more real. Eventually, I opened them anyway. Each bedroom was the same in its emptiness. Bare floors, blank walls. Closets with nothing but a single wire hanger swinging slightly, though there was no breeze that I could feel. I told myself it was just the air shifting as I moved. The last door led to a small bathroom. Everything was clean, unused. The mirror above the sink reflected me back in fragments, slightly warped at the edges. I didn't like the way my reflection seemed too sharp against the stillness of the room. Upstairs was the final part of the house, a narrow staircase tucked near the living room, its steps worn down at the center. Each one groaned softly as I climbed, like it resented the weight. At the top was a single large room, unfinished, exposed beams, a slanted ceiling, one small window facing the forest. Dust lay thick across the floor, untouched. This, I decided, would be my bedroom. It felt removed, separate from the rest of the house, as if the upstairs existed slightly out of sync with everything below. I dropped my bags near the wall and sat on the floor, letting out a slow breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Empty house. Quiet place. Exactly what I needed. By the time evening settled in, I had unpacked enough to feel semi-human. A mattress on the floor, a lamp plugged into an outlet that crackled faintly before settling into a steady glow. I ate a cold sandwich in the kitchen, standing at the counter, listening to the forest wake up outside. As the light faded, the house changed. Not dramatically, subtly. The shadows deepened in ways that didn't quite match the angles of the rooms. The silence grew heavier, pressing in instead of opening up. The normal nighttime sounds, the creaks, the pops of cooling wood were there, but spaced oddly, like they were being timed. I told myself that was normal too. Around 10, I turned off the lights downstairs and climbed back up to the bedroom. The darkness felt thicker now, less forgiving. My footsteps echoed longer than before. When I lay down, the house seemed to settle around me, like a body finding a more comfortable position. I stared at the ceiling, listening. Wind brushed against the roof. Branches scraped lightly against the siding. Somewhere far off, an owl called once, then went silent. I closed my eyes. That's when I noticed it. A sound beneath everything else. At first, I thought it was my own breathing, slow, steady. A soft rise and fall. I focused on it, syncing my breath to the rhythm. But the sound didn't change. I inhaled deeply. The sound continued, unchanged. I held my breath. Still there. It was faint. Almost imperceptibly. A low, steady cadence, like air moving through something hollow. Not a draft, not wind. It seemed to come from everywhere, from the walls, the floor, the ceiling above me. I sat up, heart beating a little faster now. The sound faded slightly as I moved, then returned once I was still again. I listened harder. In, out, in, out. Too slow to be mechanical, too steady to be coincidence. The house wasn't making noise. It was breathing. I laughed quietly to myself, the sound brittle in the dark. Old houses make sounds, pipes, wood, settling. My imagination was running wild because I was tired, alone, and surrounded by unfamiliar space. I lay back down, the breathing continued. I turned onto my side, facing the wall. The sound seemed closer there, fuller, like pressing an ear against a chest. That was when the thought crept in, uninvited and unwelcome. What if the house isn't empty? I dismissed it immediately. There was no evidence, no movement, no voices, no footsteps, just the sound, just the rhythm. Eventually, exhaustion won. My eyes closed, even as the breathing carried on beneath my dreams. The last thing I remember thinking before sleep took me was simple, almost comforting. It's just the house settling. I would learn soon enough how wrong I was. I woke up convinced someone was standing over me. My eyes snapped open, heart already racing, breath caught halfway in my chest. The room was dark, the kind of darkness that feels heavy, like it presses against your skin. For a moment, I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. Nothing stood above me. No shadow, no figure. Just the low ceiling and the faint outline of the window, barely visible against the night. But the feeling didn't go away. That sensation you get when you being watched doesn't disappear just because logic tells you it's irrational. It lingers, crawls along the back of your neck, makes your skin prickle, and underneath it all, the breathing, slow, deep, patient, in, out. In, out, it was louder now than it had been before I fell asleep. Not loud enough to echo, not loud enough to vibrate the floor, but unmistakable, as if the house had grown more comfortable with me inside it. I sat up slowly, careful not to make noise, as if whatever was breathing might react. The mattress shifted beneath my weight, and for half a second the sound faltered. Then it resumed. My throat felt dry. I glanced at the walls, the corners, the shadows where something could be hiding if this were that kind of story. It wasn't. Nothing moved. The sound didn't come from a single place. It didn't travel. It didn't echo. It simply was. I pressed my palm against the floor, cold, solid. Still, I leaned down and put my ear closer. The breathing grew clearer. That was when fear finally settled in, deep and real. Not panic. Panic is loud and chaotic. This was quieter, heavier, the kind of fear that sinks instead of spikes. I stood up. The room creaked in protest, the old wood stretching beneath my feet. The breathing didn't stop. If anything, it seemed to deepen, as though, acknowledging my movement, I grabbed the lamp and switched it on. Warm light filled the room, pushing the shadows back into their corners. The walls were the same pale color they had been the night before. No cracks, no movement, no pulsing, nothing that looked alive. The sound softened, but didn't vanish. I followed it. Barefoot, I moved slowly toward the door, every step deliberate. The hallway outside was darker, the light from my room barely touching the staircase. The breathing felt stronger there, more present. I rested my hand against the wall. There it was again, that sensation. Not warmth, not vibration, just presence, like touching something that wasn't supposed to notice you, but somehow did. I pulled my hand away. "Get a grip," I whispered to myself. My voice sounded wrong in the house. Too small. Too fragile. I made my way downstairs, turning on lights as I went. Each switch brought a brief sense of relief, like pushing back a tide. The living room, the kitchen, the hallway, nothing had changed. The house looked exactly the same, and yet the breathing followed me. Not louder, not quieter, but consistent. I checked the doors, locked, windows closed. No vents large enough to carry sound like that. No furnace running, no appliances humming. I stood in the center of the living room and listened. That was when I realized something else. The breathing wasn't just steady, it was synchronized. With me, when my heart raced, it slowed slightly, as if calming me. When I stood still, it deepened. It felt intentional. I didn't sleep after that. I sat on the couch with the lights on until dawn crept in through the windows, washing the room in pale gray. The breathing faded gradually with the light, thinning until it was barely there. By morning, it was gone. I told myself what anyone would, but old houses make noise. Stress does strange things to the mind. Isolation amplifies imagination. There had to be a rational explanation. Still, I didn't go back upstairs. I spent the day exploring the property, desperate for normalcy. The land was beautiful, in a quiet, forgotten way. Moss-covered rocks, tall grass bending lazily in the breeze. Birds calling from somewhere high above. Everything felt alive out there. Too alive. When I came back inside that afternoon, the house felt different. Not quieter, emptier, like something had withdrawn, retreating deeper where I couldn't sense it. I found a door I hadn't noticed before. It was in the hallway near the kitchen, low and narrow, half hidden behind a coat rack. The wood was darker than the other doors. Older. No handle, just a small metal latch. I stared at it for a long time. I don't know how I'd missed it the day before. The hallway wasn't that long. There weren't many places to hide something, and yet there it was. I knelt and opened it. The smell hit me first. Not rot, not mold. Something stale, trapped like air that hadn't moved in years. A crawl space stretched beneath the house, shallow but wide. Wooden beams crisscrossed overhead, thick with dust. The earth below was dry, packed hard. I shined my phone's flashlight inside. Nothing. No nests, no pipes, no animals. Just darkness, stretching back farther than the light reached. I closed the door. That night, I slept downstairs. The breathing returned almost immediately, stronger, closer. It didn't wait for me to fall asleep this time. The sound rose and fell from beneath the floorboards, slow and deliberate. I lay on the couch, staring at the ceiling, my muscles locked tight. In, out, in, out. I felt it then, a shift. Not movement exactly. More like pressure changing, the way air does before a storm. The couch dipped slightly beneath me, just enough to notice, as if the house were adjusting its grip. The breathing grew warmer, not literally, but emotionally intimate, familiar. I whispered again, "This isn't real." The house answered by breathing deeper, and for the first time, I understood something with terrifying clarity. The house wasn't pretending to be empty. It was waiting. Why, the third night, I stopped pretending the sounds were normal. There's a limit to how much the human mind can rationalize before something breaks. A point where explanations start to feel like lies you're telling yourself just to keep breathing. I reached that point sometime around 2:11 a.m. when the house sighed, not creaked, not groaned, sighed, long and low, as if settling deeper into itself. I was sitting at the kitchen table, a mug of cold coffee between my hands. I hadn't realized it had gone cold. I hadn't realized much of anything except the way the air felt thicker than it should, like it had weight. The lights were on, every single one of them. Upstairs, downstairs, hallways, closets. I'd turned them all on after the second night, hoping brightness would keep the fear at bay. It didn't. The breathing had become a constant companion now. Not loud enough to drown out my thoughts, but present enough that silence no longer existed. It came from everywhere and nowhere, woven into the bones of the house. I stood and pressed my palm flat against the kitchen wall. The surface felt different. Not warm, not cold, yielding. I pulled my hand back immediately, heart pounding. When I looked at my palm, there was nothing there, no residua, no imprint. Just the faintest tremor in my fingers. I laughed then, a sharp, humorless sound that startled even me. "This is ridiculous," I said aloud. The house breathed in response, slow, deep, as if listening. I spent the next day trying to leave. I packed my bag, folded my clothes with shaking hands, told myself I could come back later with someone else, an inspector, a friend, anyone. The front door wouldn't open. Not stuck, not jammed, locked. I tried the key again, turned it harder. The metal bit into my fingers. The lock didn't budge. I checked the back door. Locked. Windows. Every one of them sealed tight. I wasn't trapped in the way horror movies portray it. There were no slamming doors, no dramatic moments. Just the quiet certainty that the house had closed itself around me. When I stepped away from the door, the breathing softened, as if pleased. I stopped struggling after that. The house seemed to appreciate compliance. The layout began to feel wrong. Not obviously so. No walls moving in front of my eyes. No rooms disappearing. It was subtler than that. Hallways felt longer than they should. Corners didn't line up with my memory. The staircase creaked differently depending on the direction I climbed it. At night, I dreamed of corridors folding into themselves, of rooms stacked inside rooms, of spaces that only existed when I wasn't looking directly at them. When I woke, the dreams lingered like after images. The breathing began to mimic me. I noticed it one night as I lay on the couch, staring at the ceiling fan. My chest rose. The sound beneath the floor followed. I held my breath. So did the house. The silence stretched, tight and unbearable. When I exhaled, the house exhaled with me, perfectly timed. Tears welled in my eyes, then not from terror, but from something closer to grief. The realization hit me slowly, like a bruise forming. It was learning me, my rhythms, my habits, the way I moved through space. During the day, the house felt dormant. still watchful, but quiet. At night, it came alive in ways I couldn't ignore. Floorboards softened beneath my feet, bending just slightly to accommodate my weight. Doorways felt narrower, shaped more precisely to my shoulders. I found dust patterns that looked like footprints, but only one set, mine. The crawlspace door was open when I found it again. I hadn't touched it since the first night. I knew I hadn't, and yet there it was, the latch hanging loose, darkness yawning wide beneath the house. The breathing was strongest there. I knelt, heart hammering, and shined my flashlight inside. The beam caught something new. Indentations, shallow at first, then deeper farther in, as if something had been lying there for a long time, something roughly my size. I slammed the door shut and staggered back. The house responded with a sound I hadn't heard before, a low, contented hum. That night, I slept in my bed again. Not because I felt safe, because it felt expected. The sheets were warm when I lay down, not freshly washed warm, body warm. I lay rigid, staring at the ceiling, listening to the breathing rise and fall beneath me. It wrapped around the room, intimate and close, like arms I couldn't see. I whispered, "What do you want?" The house breathed in, then out. And for the first time, the sound came from inside the walls, from the ceiling, from the space directly behind my headboard. Slow, patient, as if answering without words. I understood then the house wasn't trying to scare me. It was making room. I stopped asking questions after that night. Questions implied answers, and answers implied voices I didn't want to hear. Instead, I learned to listen, not actively, not straining, but in the way you listen to your own breathing when you retrying to fall asleep. A passive awareness, a surrender. The house liked that. The breathing no longer startled me awake. It became a background rhythm, like waves against a distant shore. When it paused, that's when I felt panic bloom in my chest. Silence was worse. On the fourth morning, I woke to the smell of dust and damp wood. Not unpleasant, old, familiar, like an attic from childhood. I lay still, staring at the ceiling, tracing the hairline cracks that had begun to resemble veins. They hadn't been there before, at least I didn't think they had. I sat up slowly. The bed shifted beneath me, not sagging, but adjusting, supporting my movement in a way that felt intentional. "Stop," I whispered. The breathing hesitated, then continued. I spent that day exploring the house more thoroughly than I had before, though exploring isn't the right word. It implies curiosity. This was closer to inventory. I needed to know how much of the house had changed, and how much of that change I was imagining. The living room felt smaller. The walls hadn't moved, but the space between them felt compressed, like the room was holding its breath. The windows let in less light now, though the sky outside was clear and blue. Dust motes hung motionless in the air, refusing to drift. The kitchen clock had stopped. Not broken, just paused. The second hand hovered between ticks, suspended mid-motion. When I leaned closer, I could hear it faintly, a soft clicking sound that never quite resolved into movement. I didn't touch it. The basement door was warm. That was new. I stood at the top of the steps, hand hovering inches from the knob. The warmth radiated outward, pulsing faintly in time with the breathing. The smell was stronger, earthy, organic, alive. "I don't want to," I said, though I wasn't sure who I was speaking to. The house breathed in. The door opened on its own. Slowly, quietly, respectfully. The basement lights flickered on as I descended. The stairs felt different beneath my feet, less rigid, more forgiving. The walls had lost their straight edges, rounding subtly at the corners. The breathing was louder here, not overwhelming, intimate. At the bottom of the stairs, I froze. The floor wasn't concrete anymore. It looked like it, at first glance. Grey, smooth. But when I stepped forward, my foot sank slightly, like stepping onto packed soil after rain. I pulled back instinctively. The surface rebounded. I crouched and pressed my fingers down. The floor yielded, then firmed, adjusting to the pressure. It wasn't sticky. It wasn't wet. It was responsive. My stomach churned. The flashlight beam caught movement along the far wall, not crawling, not slithering. A subtle shifting, like something beneath a blanket adjusting its position. "Hello," my voice cracked. The breathing deepened. The walls flexed. I backed toward the stairs, heart pounding, but the steps behind me felt farther away than they had a moment ago. I turned sharply. The staircase was longer now, not dramatically, just enough to notice, just enough to know. "I want to leave," I said, louder this time. The breathing stopped. For a moment, there was nothing. Then the floor beneath me pulsed. Once, twice. Like a heartbeat, something moved beneath the surface, slow, deliberate, traveling toward me. The outline wasn't sharp, but I could see the displacement, the way the floor rose and fell as it approached. I ran. The stairs met me halfway, shortening again as I climbed. I didn't look back. I didn't stop until I was in the living room, gasping for air that felt suddenly too thin. The house exhaled, long satisfied. That night, I found the journal. It was tucked inside a loose floorboard in the upstairs hallway. I hadn't noticed the board before, but now it creaked differently when I stepped on it, hollow, almost inviting. The journal was old, leather-bound, the cover warped and cracked. No name on the front. The handwriting inside was neat at first, precise, controlled. "The house breathes," the first entry read. I thought it was pipes. I was wrong. I read until my eyes burned. The writer there was no name. Only dates had moved into the house decades before me. They described the same sensations, the same rationalizations, the same slow realization. "It doesn't want everyone," one entry said. "Just one." My hands shook as I turned the pages. It makes room. It reshapes. It learns. If you resist, it tightens. If you accept, it soothes. Later entries grew erratic. "I can feel it when I sleep. It presses closer every night. I think it's lonely. The last entry was short. I don't think it will let me leave. But I don't think I want to anymore. There were no entries after that. No mention of escape, no explanation. Just silence. That night, the dreams changed. I wasn't walking through the house anymore. I was the house. I felt my walls stretch and settle. I felt the pressure of the earth against my foundation. I felt the slow satisfaction of filling empty spaces. When I woke, my arms ached. Not sore heavy, as if they had been holding something for a very long time. I went to the bathroom mirror and lifted my shirt. Faint impressions marked my skin, not bruises, not wounds. Shapes, lines, that curved and intersected, mirroring the cracks in the ceiling above my bed. I pressed my fingers into my ribs. The skin resisted, then yielded. I pulled my hand away, shaking. "Oh," I whispered. The breathing softened, almost apologetic. The house wasn't forcing me. That was the worst part. It was waiting, learning, making itself comfortable, making space for me. The house spoke to me for the first time on the 5th night. Not with words, with recognition. I woke just before dawn, that thin grey hour where the world feels unfinished. The breathing was closer now, no longer beneath the floors or inside the walls, but around me. The air itself seemed to inhale and exhale, pressing gently against my skin. I lay still, afraid that if I moved, something would move back. "Good morning," I whispered, testing the idea that the house could hear me. The breathing changed. It didn't stop. It adjusted slower, deeper, matching the cadence of my voice. My throat tightened. This wasn't coincidence anymore. This was response. I sat up. Nothing resisted me. No tightening walls, no shifting floor. The house allowed it. That terrified me more than anything else so far. I walked through the hallway barefoot, each step sinking a fraction of an inch before the floor firmed beneath me. The sensation was disturbingly intimate, like walking on something that knew exactly how much pressure I needed. "Are you alive?" I asked softly. The walls creaked not randomly, but rhythmically. 3 slow sounds, evenly spaced, no. Then a pause. Then one deeper creak. Yes. My knees buckled, and I had to lean against the wall to stay upright. The surface curved to meet my shoulder, supporting me. I hadn't imagined the journal. I hadn't imagined the changes in my body. I hadn't imagined the feeling of being held. The house wasn't haunted. It was inhabited, and it was alone. I found more signs that daisy more things at first. A mug left on the counter when I was sure I'd put it away. The couch cushion molded perfectly to my body before I sat down. The sound of breathing growing faster when I was anxious, slower when I calmed myself. It was mirroring me. Learning emotional cues. That evening, I tried something dangerous. I sat in the living room and spoke as if the house were a person. "I don't belong to you," I said. The lights dimmed slightly. I didn't agree to this. The temperature dropped. "I want to leave." The breathing became erratic, uneven, almost panicked. I felt it then, not anger, not malice, but something raw and desperate, a need so intense it pressed against my chest until breathing became difficult. Loneliness. The house didn't want to trap me, it wanted to keep me. I can't stay forever, I said more gently. I'm not built for that. The walls shuddered, the floor pulsed once beneath my feet, harder this time. I realized then that the house wasn't just learning my shape, it was afraid of losing it. That night, I dreamed of the previous occupant, not as a person, but as an outline human-shaped, but hollow. They stood embedded in the walls, their face stretched thin across the plaster, eyes closed, mouth open in a silent exhale. When I approached, their eyes opened, and they smiled. I woke screaming. The house reacted instantly. The breathing rushed, the walls tightened around the room, closing in just enough to make my heart race. The bed rose beneath me, cradling my body, holding me down. No, I gasped. Stop, please. The pressure eased. The breathing slowed. The house learned fear quickly. The next morning, I noticed something new in the mirror. My reflection lagged. Just a fraction of a second, but enough. When I lifted my hand, the reflection followed late, like it needed to check with something before copying me. I leaned closer. The reflection smiled. I did not. I stumbled back, heart hammering, and the smile faded. My reflection snapped back into sync as if nothing had happened. I covered the mirror with a towel. That afternoon, the journal reappeared. Not where I'd left it. It sat open on the kitchen table, pages fluttering slightly, despite the absence of any breeze. A new entry had been added. The handwriting matched the old ones, but the ink was wet. "You're doing better than I did," it read. "You listen." I dropped the journal as if it burned. "I didn't write that," I said aloud. The breathing responded with something new, a sound I can only describe as pleased. I realized then that the house wasn't just reacting, it was communicating, writing, learning language, using my tools, using me. The cracks in the walls spread that evening, branching like veins. They traced familiar paths, my arms, my legs, my spine. Wherever I stood too long, the patterns deepened, as if the house were mapping me in real time. I stopped sleeping in the bed. I slept on the floor instead, curled tightly, afraid of how perfectly the mattress now fit me. The floor adjusted anyway. There was no escaping contact. Late that night, as I lay staring at the ceiling, the breathing paused. Complete silence. My heart slammed in my chest. Then, from inside the walls, came a sound I had never heard before. A voice, not spoken aloud, but felt vibrations traveling through the floor, up my bones, into my skull. Not words, intent. Images flooded my mind, endless dark beneath the earth, pressure, weight, time stretching without meaning, the ache of emptiness carved into foundations and beams. Then, me, walking into the house for the first time, the front door closing, the relief. The house remembered that moment. It showed me how it felt. Chosen, I can't be your only, I whispered, tears streaming down my temples into the floor. The floor warmed beneath my cheek. The house did not respond immediately. When it did, the response was subtle. The breathing slowed to match mine, and for the first time since I arrived, I felt something close to understanding. The house didn't want to hurt me. It wanted to merge, to blur the line between shelter and occupant, to never be empty again. I didn't sleep after that. I lay there until morning, knowing with a certainty that hollowed me out from the inside, the house was patient, and patience, given enough time, always wins. I stopped trying to leave on the 6th day, not because I didn't want to, because the idea no longer occurred to me the way it used to. That realization came slowly, like noticing you've been holding your breath only after your lungs begin to burn. I woke up standing, not lying down, not sitting, standing in the hallway, feet planted shoulder-width apart, palms pressed flat against the walls on either side. The surface was warm, not room temperature, warm body warm. My chest rose. The house inhaled. My chest fell. The house exhaled. We were synchronized so perfectly it took several seconds to understand what was wrong. I pulled my hands away as if from a hot stove. The walls rippled where my palms had been dimpling inward before smoothing themselves out again. I looked down at my hands. They were pale, veins dark and prominent beneath the skin, pulsing slowly. Too slowly, my heartbeat had changed. Not weaker, not stronger, deeper, as if it had more space to echo. I went to the bathroom mirror, ripping the towel away in one violent motion. My reflection stared back at me immediately this time. No delay, no lag. Too perfect. My eyes looked wider, not bigger, exactly, but more open, as if my skull had subtly adjusted to make room for something behind them. My skin had taken on a faint grey undertone, like stone seen through fog. I leaned closer. The reflection leaned closer. "I'm still me," I said. The reflection mouthed the words half a second before I spoke them. I screamed and slammed my fist into the glass. The mirror didn't crack. It flexed, like skin. I stumbled back, gasping, and the mirror slowly returned to its rigid shape. My reflection resumed its proper timing, eyes dull again, obedient. The house did not react. No comforting warmth, no soothing breath, just stillness. That scared me more than anything else so far. I spent the morning testing myself. I pinched my arm, felt pain. I cut my finger on a kitchen knife, blood welled, red and real. But when it dripped onto the floor, the wood darkened eagerly, absorbing it before it could pull. "Give it back," I said. The floor creaked. Slowly, the blood seeped back up, forming a perfect bead on the surface. It rolled toward me, defying gravity, until it touched my bare foot and vanished into my skin. I felt warmer afterward, stronger, I realized, than what the house was doing. It wasn't just learning me, it was feeding. The journal appeared again that afternoon. This time, I didn't jump when I saw it. I sat across from it at the table, hands folded, as if preparing for a difficult conversation. The book opened by itself, new writing formed, letter by letter. You're afraid because you still think of yourself as separate. I swallowed. What happened to you? I asked. The pen moved. I stayed. A pause. I thought staying meant surviving. Images bled into my thoughts, again bones stiffening, joints locking, breath slowing until it no longer needed to pass through lungs. The feeling of walls growing closer, not as a threat, but as a replacement. You disappeared, I whispered. No, the journal corrected. I spread. My stomach churned. You became the house. The pen hesitated. The house became me. That distinction mattered, and it terrified me. I stood up abruptly, knocking the chair over. I won't do that. I won't disappear. The house responded instantly. The floor tilted not enough to knock me down, but enough to force me to brace myself. The ceiling lowered by an inch. The air thickened, pressing against my ears until they rang. Panic surged. I'm not rejecting you, I said quickly. I just need to stay me. The pressure eased, the house was listening. Negotiating that night, I noticed I no longer needed the lights on to see. The darkness wasn't empty anymore. It had depth, texture. I could sense the layout of rooms, even with my eyes closed, like an internal map unfolding behind my thoughts. I knew where every beam was, every nail, every hollow space beneath the stairs. I knew where the house hurt yesterday. There were weak spots, old damage buried beneath renovations. Places where the structure felt thin, strained, tired. The knowledge wasn't visual, it was instinctive. Like knowing where your tongue goes when you have a sore tooth. I pressed my palm against one of those places, an interior wall near the back of the house. The pain surged through me, sharp, immediate, shared. I yanked my hand back with a cry. The house shuddered. For the first time, I felt its fear not of being alone, but of being damaged. It needed me intact. I was no longer just an occupant. I was reinforcement. That was when I understood the final lie I'd been telling myself. The house didn't trap people. It integrated them. Slowly, gently, lovingly. And once the process began, stopping it meant tearing something vital apart. That night, as I lay on the floor, the breathing wrapped around me like a lullaby. I didn't fight it. For a moment. Just a moment it felt peaceful, too peaceful. And in that quiet, horrifying calm, a thought slipped into my mind fully formed, complete, and not entirely my own. Staying wouldn't be dying. It would be becoming. I don't know how long I lay there considering it. But when I finally closed my eyes, the house did something it had never done before. It dreamed, and this time I was inside the dream with it.